Okay, so I'm not quite sure how this one happened. It's the sort of quote unquote mistake slash error slash leak that you wouldn't expect from a gigantic company like Microsoft. But yesterday, The Verge reported that, well, essentially Microsoft had leaked its own front end update showing that you would have the ability to access Steam games within the Xbox user interface. And this was quickly withdrawn and replaced with a user interface that did not show Steam games being accessible on the Xbox user interface. But basically, it just seems to be further fuel to the fire, which suggests that there's going to be a grand unification of digital storefronts within the Xbox, I wouldn't say ecosystem, but basically their front end shell for PC. And Alex, what do you make of this?
Well, this is good in the aspect that you'll be able to kind of like GOG, like their Galaxy launcher. I believe you can, or what is they call? What I forget what they call it, but you can kind of like launch multiple storefronts games from within one. It's kind of like adding a non-Steam game to Steam, but it's a lot better. This this is I think the only way forward Microsoft really has. A lot of people will have built up libraries like myself ever since the beginning of Steam. And if you want to use, either you're going to be using Steam Big Picture mode, like Oliver talked about last week, or you're going to want to do something native within Windows under this new project. And I think this is pretty much the only way they're going to be able to make this realizable in the immediate short term. One thing I'm curious about, though, is how much info can be plugged out of that other than just like the equivalent of an exe shortcut. Right. Because one thing you'd want to know is whether or not a game is being patched, maybe. You'd maybe want to know its download status from this menu. You'd kind of want to know the same information about a game and managing it like you would in a typical Steam menu or in a typical Xbox menu, right? And I'm curious to see how much interoperability there actually potentially could be.
Yeah. Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, this is certainly a very welcome change. I think, like Alex said, it's kind of necessary because Steam is such a huge storefront, right? Obviously very important for the kind of end-to-end integrated experience that you would expect that Xbox would eventually have, whether it's through the Xbox app or through changes to the operating system. Probably the latter, but I presume it would have some integration with the Xbox app as well. But there are so many issues with the Xbox app from my perspective for navigating it with a controller and for using it on the go. In particular, it's basically not really accessible through a controller. Like you punch around on the D-pad and you can make selections, but you can't actually switch tabs in the interface. You can't really do too much with the controller. There's very, very limited integration there. So I think they have a lot of area to go to improve this. I don't know whether they'll do it all at once or whether they'll roll it out gradually. Certainly this would seem to suggest a bit more of the latter approach. But I would hope that, yeah, in the fullness of time, they end up with a solution here that does work out pretty well for controller players and pretty well for people who have big Steam libraries, because that's obviously a really critical aspect of this whole effort, I think.
Yeah. My thoughts on this. Well, I think you're quite right, Alex, in that you've got to basically either be all in on this or it is essentially just a fairly low-tech launcher, right? I mean, the concept of being able to access Xbox games and Steam games within a single unified launcher, it's actually nothing new. I don't think, there are solutions right now. In fact, basically all the handhelds already ship with their own rudimentary launchers that allow you to have, what you might call a one-stop shop to all of the different titles that are installed on your PC. The issue is, of course, that it is rudimentary. What's happening with game updates, what's happening with patch updates, all of the information that Steam offers. What about beta branches, that sort of thing? I honestly think that if you're going to be integrating other stores, you can't just have a basic launcher. It's got to be more than that. Otherwise, you're going to end up going back to the same old problem, which is that, okay, right, I've still got to access Windows 11 to basically get the full range of functionality, and that's problematic. I think if you're going to be advertising a system that does everything, it's got to kind of do everything. It's got to be able to access those features. and it's going to be tricky, and it may require some sort of hookup with Valve or with Epic or whoever to make it everything it needs to be. Now, obviously, looking at this mock-up image, and it does seem to be a mock-up image as opposed to anything sort of final and official. Mm-hmm. I mean, it is basically there with Xbox consoles. It's there with a ROG Ally. It's there with mobile devices. So I'm not quite sure how all that's going to pan out with Steam. So I think in that respect, it probably is early doors. Obviously, with the handheld, this Project Kennen that's apparently coming this year, you'd want this sort of functionality, even at a basic level. However, once they're going into next generation, where apparently there is going to be access to other storefronts, I guess my question is, how far will they push it? The concept of buying an Xbox console, having Steam on it, and potentially buying Steam games. Are they going to go that far? That's the thing. How much are they willing to cede the walled garden, so to speak? The concept of the PC, of course, is that it's an open platform, right? And the idea that Microsoft is kind of making, or potentially making, a version of that open platform that's only as open as they kind of feel comfortable making it. Tricky. Mm-hmm. Really, really interesting to see that. Well, I'd love to know the production process that enabled this leak to happen. It is kind of baffling. Any extra thoughts on this, Alex? I mean, I think basically all bets are off when it comes to next generation. I mean, with the handheld that's coming, which is presumably kind of like more PC than Xbox, so to speak, the idea of having easy access to other storefronts isn't actually that much of a big deal. And it's kind of welcome and it's kind of necessary. But the question is really, when they move on to those next generation consoles, how much are they going to cede to the open platform, and how much are they going to continue to be protective over the Xbox store?
I think they're going to have to cede a lot more than they would potentially have liked in a more ideal situation, because they, in comparison to Sony, are just floundering on the console sales side of things. And then, they're down over what Xbox One was doing in a similar period, with 2 boxes, right? So a potentially larger audience because the price brackets are different. And they're still not hitting the numbers that they did previously in time. And I think that shows a lot that the current model of things doesn't have the market for them anymore there, and they have to branch out to new markets. And the only way we really can do that is entice people with entirely new feature sets that just you won't get anywhere else. And that is, from Microsoft's perspective, the PC feature set brought in some slightly compromised form to a box that is a lot more controlled and less hectic. The only thing I think sucks for them is that, man, they wouldn't have to be working all this stuff backwards if there was better coordination between the divisions of Microsoft years ago. When Windows Vista came out, there was the idea to unify Windows under Gaming for Windows, with a lot of failure with regards to how its integration with Windows Live worked, which sucked. But other concepts of it, like the games tab in Windows, the performance ratings in Windows, the unified save games folder, and all these things, actually were steps forward that were abandoned at some point. And these things, if they were historically existent previously, they could have been used over time to have built up this library and this interoperability on PC that just isn't there anymore, because they kind of gave up with Gaming for Windows and they just said everything's a tablet. That's all we care about. We only care about tablet PCs. And then they gave up with that. And they kind of were we need your Windows money. Please give us your Windows games money. So they brought back in DX11, 12, all that stuff that happened afterwards that we know now. So I feel like these are them having to work backwards to work on things that could have potentially been solved already a decade ago. But it is now the way it is, and they have competition from Valve. I would say really big competition from Valve when they didn't necessarily need to be this way. They ceded the market to Valve years ago when it didn't need to be that way.
Right. I mean, Oliver, you've been following the Valve trajectory with SteamOS, and they're in a much better position than Microsoft at the moment, I'd say.
I certainly think in terms of having that really strong end-to-end user interface, the ability to update your device through that interface, the ability to get precompiled shaders or to be able to compile shaders in advance through fossilize different kinds of elements that interface and operating system, they all work really, really well together. Microsoft has the advantage in the sense that games are natively built for Windows. They don't have to use a compatibility layer. That is a pretty big advantage. You would think, at least, that is a pretty big advantage. But Valve basically has like that kind of end-to-end solution for players already figured out through SteamOS, even through Steam Big Picture mode. Like, you know, I never use the Xbox app nowadays. Really, I use it very rarely. I'm always using Steam Big Picture mode on my own personal PC, navigating it with a gamepad there. So yeah, I just feel like Microsoft has so much ground to overcome, and I'm hoping to see something big from them soon, or else I think this kind of effort will be maybe a little bit of a failed one, unless they can ultimately get to that level where Valve already is and hopefully exceed them, because that is kind of the benchmark for these devices. And I just think if you put like a Lenovo Legion Go versus the Lenovo Legion Go S, right? That new Steam edition, that new Steam OS edition version of the Lenovo Legion Go S, I think anyone would pick the SteamOS variant of that device in a heartbeat. I just think it's such a superior interface and a superior solution for handheld gaming.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah. I mean, you do wonder whether there might be more provisions within SteamOS to access those other games that aren't on Steam, because they're in pole position. They've got, you know, basic ownership of that market at the moment, and being able to access supplementary games, I think, would be a good thing for SteamOS. It's a bit tricky at the moment, isn't it?
It is.
But at the same time, it's, you know, we've got two companies here coming at things from different directions. You know, we've got Steam that have basically owned that particular space, certainly in the handheld side. And then you've got, and it's kind of bizarre to say it, you've got Microsoft, which is, you know, essentially the full stakeholder in Windows, the underlying operating system, playing catch up here. And obviously, this is just a mock-up, most likely, but it's going to take more than a Steam button to actually entice people to actually use your system, I think. Mm-hmm. Interesting stuff, though. Interesting that it leaked at all. Fascinating stuff. It says here in the Verge article that the image disappeared when they told them about it.
Whoops.
Which kind of made me chuckle. But yeah, obviously we're going to be following this with much interest, but you know, they've got to be radical. Microsoft have got to think radically on this and take out the wish fulfillment from what they want from the games market on PC and Xbox on PC, and just basically make something that is just great for the status quo and build on that, I think.